Joining us on the line is my friend and famous Fox News host, Greg Gutfeld. His book is The Plus, Self-Help for People Who Hate Self-Help, which makes perfect sense because when I thought people who are going to write a self-help book, I got to tell you, Greg Gutfeld, that was not going to be like my top 10 list of self-help. I was like Jordan Peterson and like Dr. Phil and Greg Gutfeld. So that was definitely a new. What drove you, Greg Gutfeld, to write a self-help book?
I think I was tired of hearing myself talk about the problems. And I've been writing books and doing these monologues and talking about what's wrong. And I think I just got sick of hearing myself. And I thought, well, what if I could actually figure out solutions to these problems? And a lot of them had to do with mob culture, social media, cancel culture. But also, and I don't know if you remember this, Ben, when we talk, but I worked in service journalism. I worked at Men's Health and Prevention Magazine. I did like this self-help how-to stuff every month. The only difference was I had absolutely no wisdom. I was in my 20s and 30s. I was half the time I was drinking, the other half, God knows what I was doing. But I was the last person you would ever take advice from. And that's the way a lot of self-help people are, is that you find out when you hire them for a show or you do something with them and you see them behind the scenes, they're absolutely awful. They're a mess. They can't get their life together. The people that pitch to me self-help stuff like how to be more organized or how to get the perfect job, and you meet them and they're scary. So I realized it's true. But then, so now I'm like in my 50s and I'm sitting here and I'm writing about these things and I feel like I was a broken record. And I didn't even have a book contract for this. I thought that all of these psychological problems can be improved because to me they're psychological, so why not try? So I decided to just be a corny, cheesy self-help writer.
So how do you stay happy? How do you stay happy in the news cycle? I mean, honestly, this is something I battle with every day. I got a lot of questions about this. It's very difficult to be happy when you're in the news cycle constantly. I can see how people who just disconnect from the news, disconnect from social media, can live a happy life. But it's a very difficult thing to be, as you are or as I am, in the news every day, and the news only covers bad stuff happening in the world and then asks you to comment on it. So how do you stay happy in that climate?
Well, I think the thing is I know it's the awareness of that, the fact that you are stuck in some weird nightmarish cycle that only makes money with discontent. As long as A is against B, everything's fine. But the moment that like A and B come together, like blacks and whites or poor and middle class, then the news cycle just collapses and it doesn't work. So knowing that helps you step out of it. I have this conversation with my wife all the time because I go, you don't understand. And she goes, yeah, because I'm out of that loop. She goes hiking, she goes skiing, she does her stuff. But I can't, even when I'm away, I can't kind of get out of it because it's always going to be there. It's like when people tell you to turn off Twitter or social media. It's not like you can turn off the rain cloud. They're still going to come after you, Ben. Like if you say, hey, if I don't follow that stuff, they're still going to try to get you fired. It's not like they're going away. So it's something that you only have to put in perspective. And it is true. I mean, Scott Adams says, go outside, go for a walk, and you realize the world hasn't changed. And he's kind of right. The moment you go outside is probably the best remedy for the news because you see how little outside changes unless you're in Midtown Manhattan or downtown Los Angeles as you watch it decline into this bizarre dystopian nightmare.
So one of the big kind of disconnects, I think, is it's true that it's harder for people who are in the news to feel happy, but it's also true that if you're in a position that you are or I am, you can sort of refuse to be canceled. What do you recommend to folks who, you mentioned cancel culture, what do you recommend? I get this question a lot. You got a bunch of people who are working at just normal companies and they feel completely silenced. There's a poll that came out last week saying 62% of Americans said they're afraid of saying what they think about politics because they're afraid they're going to be canceled or there'll be blowback or they'll be fired. What do you recommend to them in terms of leading a happy life? Because obviously, you can't avoid politics completely. And in doing that, kind of hiding your own politics is actually a pretty stressful thing. So what do you recommend to folks who don't have the ability to just say no to the cancel culture the way that you, Greg Gutfeld, do, or thank God I do?
Yeah, I think the sad reality is if you're not wealthy or if you're not protected or if you don't own your own business, like you're in a better position, Ben, because you own your stuff. I mean, I work for a company. So I'm vulnerable. The moment that, I become a liability, I'm gone. The chute comes up. But you, I mean, it's like, I mean, you and you think about, you know, obviously Joe Rogan and Dave Rubin, the smart way forward is doing what you guys are doing. And I've always known that. And I've always had my foot in that. But I never jumped. I instead have always been kind of like, I like where I work, but I realize that as long as I'm not autonomous, I'm always going to be vulnerable. But I do think, okay, for the average person, they have no choice at this point, but they have to lay low. They can't, like, you got to, like, you have to understand that cancel culture is a First Amendment workaround. You can say, like, you could say, hey, you have the freedom of speech. Yes, but you could still ruin my career, ruin my, destroy my livelihood, and drive me to suicide if you so wish. But I still have the freedom of speech. But people have to understand that cancel culture is the first. It's historical. It's the First Amendment workaround. And I think that for now, until we decide as a culture to share the risk, which is a phrase I first heard from Claire Lehman when I interviewed her, and it resonated with me, that until we share the risk, and that means your bosses share the risk, and at Fox they do, but not everybody does. I mean, you can get fired like that. I mean, you read about people that will, they'll tweet "All Lives Matter" or "Blue Lives Matter," and then they have to resign. Or the guy that had to resign because he wrote a piece against women in the military 35 years ago. But he had to resign now. I think that we have to start sharing the risk. We could be the better angels, meaning, we could be defining people at their best and not their worst. We can always forgive. Like, I've forgiven people who will not forgive me. I would name them, but I'm not. But like, I forgave some dude, not forgave. He was about to lose his job. It's a left winger, and I defended him. A month later, he comes after me. It's like I thought maybe there would be some kind of mutually assured forgiveness. No, not at all. So then that makes me think, well, maybe I should listen to like some of the guys at Breitbart who say like, no mutually assured forgiveness, mutually assured destruction. If they come after you, you come after them. And I can see that point too. But I think, right now, we as a people have to be more open about sharing the risk and defend people who might not defend you. That's the altruistic way. I'm not sure it's going to work, but I'm hopeful that this can't keep going on because I think the left are going to run out of people to destroy, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that's my hope, too, is that the radical left is actually becoming so radical and they're closing the Overton window so much that you're starting to see mainstream liberals go, this is too much. We can't handle this. Now, that's still a far cry from mainstream liberals deciding they'll actually have a conversation with Greg Gutfeld or with me, obviously. They won't open the Overton window enough. It'll be just open enough for them to escape, but not open enough for them to actually have a conversation with someone who disagrees. So they're going to have to get over that barrier. The book is The Plus, Self-Help for People Who Hate Self-Help by Greg Gutfeld. So Greg, in the book, one of the things that you talk about is the idea that you really need to move forward all the time, that forward momentum is a big thing, that if you wake up in the same place you were 3 years ago, you're doing something wrong. So how do people gain a sort of life momentum, especially right now when it feels like there's so much stagnation? It's so difficult to get up and push forward in a chaotic climate where you're being told very often you can't even go to work, you can't interact with other people. Well, how do you create a trajectory for yourself?
Well, there's a psychological component and then just the plain practical physical one. The psychological one is, for me, was learning to reject the sunk cost, meaning that all the investment that I had in something before. And I remember this feeling when I was younger and in relationships. And you see this in relationships mainly, people that have been together for 3 years, but it's terrible. They're not married, but it's terrible, but they're together for 3 years because there's so much investment that they put in. And they think like, if I walk away from this now, all of that is gone. People are like that with ideas, and they're like that with jobs, and they're like that with relationships. They're like that with cities. Like, I've lived here all my life. So I think the first thing for me was the sunk cost. What can I change that I know I've been doing a lot of, but what can I walk away from this? I won't get into the things that I've walked away with, but a lot of them were connected to sunk costs. The other thing for me is kind of like, and I have a whole chapter on this, on creating your own curriculum, which is basically just finding out stuff to do that you've always wanted to do. Now that you have this infinity of expertise in the internet. Like if I say this in my book, like if you just type in 3 things: introduction to philosophy, introduction to garage rock, introduction to martial arts, and you just plug it into YouTube, you could get yourself started on 3 different kinds of things. You might run out of expertise at a certain point where you actually need to find somebody that can teach you, but it will get you to a certain place where you're confident to do that. So I think that, like, right now we're at this rare opportunity to reinvent education, and especially in COVID. I've been doing things that, I mean, the guitar is a good example, because I just thought, if I'm going to be alone, I'm going to relearn how to play guitar, and I did it using YouTube, and that was one of the classes that I took. And I've been reading, I've read a lot of philosophy, Rene Girard, a lot of the Stoics, because the Stoics are in. Everybody got into Stoics during COVID. Did you notice this? So I did too. But I found that the Stoics are really repetitive. But that's a reason for that, because they're, they've got one road. And it's Stoic. Yes. So that's the psychological and the kind of the physical thing, is to constantly learning. Scott Adams uses the phrase talent stack, which, always try, like, don't just have one thing you can do really well. Go out, learn how to do things like public speaking is always going to help you, things like that. So it's always kind of like building up your talents.
All right, so let's talk a little bit of news, because obviously that is the other business you're in when you're not giving self-help advice to people in a great book, The Plus, Self-Help for People Who Hate Self-Help. So President Trump obviously riding pretty well behind in the polls at this point. I'm not a believer in the idea that the polls are completely wrong. I think that even if the polls are off, the president doesn't look good at this point, but there's a lot of time until the election. What do you think that Trump needs to do to turn this around? Because the media factors are never going to change. They hate him. They're going to lie about him. They're going to take everything he says at the worst possible worst possible tenor. So what does Trump need to do to turn this thing around?
Part of this, I believe, is out of his control. I think the COVID thing is such a curveball that it can go one way or the other. I think pushing the continual, the kind of the best news and doing these rather straightforward pressers have been helpful, as opposed to the kind of antagonistic ones that are entertaining and exciting, but kind of destructive. The last couple ones he's done, I thought were pretty on the money, pretty basic. And I mean, talking about the reductions in mortality is really important, but we don't, the thing is, and I think he really has to be pro-business, which he is, but talk about, every time it's like, I came up with this theory called game over theory, which is the media and the left look at every story like an old video game that has a very short story development and ends immediately, and you have to start over again. Every day you have to start over the story because you're not saving your progress. So every time you talk about COVID, you have to start over and go, of course, we want everybody to practice social distancing and wear their masks, and we don't want people to die. You have to start over the conversation every day in order to make the progress and talk about getting back to work and opening up businesses. So I think he has to be on the side of the business, on the side of businesses, on the side of workers, always reiterating that we want you to be safe, but that we cannot shut down the world's greatest economy. I think he's got to be hitting that. I think touting as much progress as you can on the prophylaxis and the vaccine, whether it happens or not. I'm skeptical in the vaccines, just because we haven't had that much great effort. I mean, we don't even have an AIDS vaccine, and we've been trying forever. But I'm going to be positive. Say hopefully it's true. Positive on that. I think on law and order, I think he needs to be stronger with our police, because I think that's going to become a bigger story, and be on the side of communities that are under siege. And also, I think the outreach with the Black community is always important, especially with what's going on in Chicago and the rising crime. I mean, he's got to be on that side, because the Democrats are deserting them. So I think that would be good too. But I'm going to say that, like, and to your point, when you say the polls can't all be wrong, but I'm assuming they might be half wrong, just because I don't know a single person that is telling the truth about what they're going to do. Back in 2016, people were reticent about what they were going to say. It's only gotten worse. If you're going to wear a red hat anywhere, there's a 50% chance you're going to get smacked in the head. There's going to be people who, if they know where you live, they're going to come and get you in the sense of doxing you or showing up and protesting if you have any political beliefs that are counter to the conformity. So it's even, I think it's more intense that you hide your true beliefs. And also, I don't know how, I mean, the one advantage Biden has, and I think it's real, and I think you probably feel this way, the hatred for Trump is probably the strongest of any political leader since Reagan for the left. I mean, I was, you were just 2 years old. Where was I? In the re-election, I think in the re-election, 84. So I was 20 and I was at Berkeley. And I mean, Reagan was Hitler. I mean, it was bad. And then it was amazing how shocked everybody was at Cal when he won. And it was because nobody said anything. Nobody was going to say anything, especially in Berkeley. And I feel like today everywhere is Berkeley, in the sense that the academic stifling of thought has left. Brett Weinstein's, what was the name of the college?
Evergreen State College.
Evergreen State College. I mean, he warned about this, that this stuff was going to end up leaving and come out everywhere, and it has. And I feel like we're living in an environment where we're all like at Sproul Hall in Berkeley.
Yeah.
We all got to nod to the protesters, give the thumbs up. Hey, we're with you, because then they won't come for you.
Yeah.
That's where we are.
Well, this does go back to some of the themes that you talk about in the Plus, self-help for people who hate self-help. And that is, how do you sort of get out? I think location is going to become a bigger and bigger issue in America. I think that if you're a conservative in a blue area, this is a miserable time for you. And I think it's going to get a lot more miserable before it gets less miserable. I think you're going to see a mass migration of people from blue areas to red areas as the cities start to deteriorate. Now, you've been spending most of your time in big blue cities. How do you how do you keep a sense of sanity in a city where if you wore a MAGA hat, you'd actually experience the possibility of getting your head broken?
It's weird because I've lived in Manhattan for a long time, but I also live upstate. I got a cabin where I am right now, which is oddly, people don't get this, but like when you go into certain rural or country areas, it's very liberal. It's like that's because it's the home of the second homes. And so you see the same signs. I have to defend New York in one way. For one, we have the worst mayor in history. The worst mayor in history. The amount of taxes we pay, we get nothing back. I cannot wait to leave. I cannot wait to get the hell out. But unfortunately, I'm never going to get out. I work at Fox, right? Unless we create some other kind of Fox satellite, I'm stuck here. And my wife, who's grown up in cities all her life, from Moscow to London to New York, she ain't going anywhere. Like she will not leave. She loves our neighborhood. So that's my insult. It's interesting in New York how little you run into politics if you want to avoid it, right? Now, I'm not well known enough like Tucker to get accosted, but I will, I go to restaurants in my neighborhood. I live downtown. I get stared at. But nobody bothers me. Maybe because they think I'm a little unbalanced, which I think is helpful to look a little crazy. And I do look a little crazy. But also, it is amazing how many people in New York are in the closet, completely in the closet. Fox heads, Shapiro heads, Republicans, and you find it out whenever you're at a restaurant and you meet the people who run the restaurant, the people who have to deal with councils and politicians and fines. They are the businessmen in New York. They aren't bleeding our heart libs, and they hate de Blasio. They have to virtue signal, but they do it as little as possible. But after what happened in my neighborhood, I live in Soho. I was destroyed in June by the looting. I think there were a lot of less liberals that morning than there were the night before, and I saw it coming. And when I was watching Minneapolis, I said, this is coming, and I know it's coming. And it was one of the worst. It was probably one of the worst things I've been through. And I wasn't even in my apartment. My wife was, and she was trapped in there. It was insane. But anyway, I digress. I can't leave. So you just gotta do what you do. There is a thing where I told my wife that if we stay, I run for mayor, but I was lying. I was trying to scare her into leaving. But she said, "Oh, you're going to run for mayor? Oh, that'll be interesting. Go for it." And she called my bluff. But it would be nice to have somebody run for mayor who is not a communist. And I know if I ran, I would lose, but I would do okay, but I would lose.
You know what? William F. Buckley did it. Right, William F. Buckley ran for mayor, and he ran to lose, and it was not bad for him. So I really would love to see Greg Gutfeld running for mayor. Just the debates between you and that giant, weird groundhog murderer would be delightful.
The groundhog murderer. He will never live that down. The worst. And by the way, all he does right now is symbolic gestures, talking about signs and placards and Trump this and Trump that. As shootings and murders skyrocketing. And I can't believe, how do the Democrats deal with this? Like, how can you turn a blind eye to this? The only explanation I have for that is if the Democrats raise their concerns about violence and crime, that somehow their brain, that aligns them with Trump. Yep. An alignment with Trump to them is far worse than death on their street, which is a tragic and sad, cowardly perspective.
It's pretty insane. It's pretty insane. So final question for you here, Greg. Obviously, we're talking about sort of the racial situation and the riots that we're seeing across the country. Do you think this lets up after November? Because it feels like, there should be fair unanimity when it comes to COVID. There should be fair unanimity when it comes to, hey, America can always do better with police brutality, but overall, this is not a racist country. Most of your neighbors aren't racist. And also, probably we shouldn't be allowing rioting and looting, and yet there is no unity. It seems almost like Americans are being blackmailed into supporting Democrats simply so that this will stop. And it seems like many in the media are pushing this. Well, if Trump goes away, then all this will stop. Do you foresee that if Biden wins in November, suddenly COVID will be off the front pages and so will race riots?
I would not. I'm so cynical that I agree with that. In fact, I tweeted there was a headline, I think it might have been from The Atlantic, said that it was a guy saying like, hey, all of these riots, it's going to get worse if Trump wins. So they're basically extorting the American public. And this is building towards that. It's like, if we don't get the orange monster out and put in, Sleepy Joe, the whole world's going to crumble. And I disagree with their claim because Joe will roll over to the left. I always say this, the left can't take yes for an answer. So even if they get somebody in there, it's not enough. They're going to want the old white man out too. By the way, there's a point I'm going to make on the 5 today. I'm watching this complete cultural appropriation of Black Lives Matter by angry, shrill, white leftists. And I assume they're with Antifa, but they might not be. But they're all dressed in black, and they're all almost always white. And I can see BLM actually kind of getting tired of this because this is the equivalent of Vanilla Ice after Grandmaster Flash. It's like they're coming in and co-opting something that it is organic and authentic. Whether you agree or not with everything that they talk about, it is organic and it's authentic. What you're seeing with these anarchists and these white screeching leftists is the opposite of authentic. It's an attention-seeking, it's a desire for attention. And if I were in Black Lives Matter, I would be like, get out of here. Leave me alone. You're making this worse because they are. Well, I don't know.
Greg Gutfeld, the book is The Plus, Self-Help for People Who Hate Self-Help. Go pick it up. It's on sale today, right? It comes out or a couple days from now.
Yes, it's out today.
So go check it out right now. Put Greg at the top of the bestseller list. Help him defeat Trump, Hurt My Dog by Mary Trump on the bestseller list this week.
By the way, Ben, you're on my show. Don't forget, you're on my show this weekend.
Perfect.
I think, right?
Yeah, I think that's right. So
excellent.
Looking forward to that, and then you'll return the favor. We'll sell each other's books. It'll be great. All righty.
Yeah, you look like you're surprised by that information.
Dude, I have no idea what's going on in my own life. I just don't. I have 3 kids under 7,
okay.
and I'm not sleeping. Well,
that's good.
Greg Gutfeld,
that's good.
The book is The Plus, Self-Help for People Who Hate Self-Help. Go check it out now. Greg, really appreciate the time. Talk to you soon.
You got it, buddy. Thanks, Ben. See you later.
I hope you enjoyed that clip from The Ben Shapiro Show. If you did, go ahead and hit the subscribe button so you stay up to date on all of our future content.